Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
A slightly relocated Ben Matlock.
Relocated Ben Matlock. We're back after a couple weeks off for the Non-Essential Podcast, a show of stories, a show of tales. I'm happy to be here. I'm recharged after a horrible, exhausting move.
Moving is never fun, but especially not fun really when you're moving
to a place you hate.
I mean, it was your move, but it was really like not. It wasn't like it was your new.
It was not ideal. This house is smaller than the one I was living in before. It's further away from everything that matters to me, and it's loud as fuck. It's probably haunted. The basement has red rum written on the wall in something that's red. I hope to God it's paint. I mean, that's
it won't
not
scrub out though. You paint it over it and it just comes back the next day.
That's not a fucking joke either. That's actually on the wall downstairs because somebody who lived here before was an asshole. And it's just really small and like I'm not like super tall, but I'm like 6'1", and just anything I do, I feel like I'm hitting my head on something. Like my mom found a fucking hobbit hole.
Yeah, and it's funny because I am not tall. I'm 5'6", but like I still get claustrophobic in houses that have low ceilings and stuff like that.
Right.
Not that I need like vaulted like loft ceilings and stuff. That'd be great, but
well, it's funny we were paying. Like this was a fixer-upper operation, and she wanted to paint the ceilings white, but the walls kind of this grayish blue color, and it looks good, but she wanted the ceilings to be white because it makes short ceilings seem higher.
Right.
If you're short. But if you're tall, you're hitting your head on that white, and that doesn't help. The illusion doesn't work if you're physically fucking running into shit all the time. And, and then, like, we didn't have internet for about a day because Comcast, the beloved company, the American company, for Americans, by Americans, gives you two options to set up your internet. And one is take your shit and then you do it, and you tell them that you did it, and then they turn it on. Or you can wait weeks for them to come out and do it for you. And
they give you like we'll be out between Monday and Thursday of next week,
right? Anytime
between 6 a.m. and 10:30 p.m.
We will wait for you to leave your house and then say you weren't home. And like, so naturally we're doing this. We're like, oh, how hard can it be to set it up? But this house has like a million fucking cable outlets. And apparently only one of them is actually connected to anything. and it took us like a day that never to find had to, it.
Yeah, trying to like trace and backtrack, like, I don't know what your, like...
It goes down to the fucking haunted basement. All the cords go down there, so it's like...
Yeah, and trying to like track what's going where is really fucking hard.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like it would be, but it is, because half that stuff runs between walls, and you're like, well, I think it comes out...
Right
here,
because we're stupid as humans are fucking dumb about how we handle internet. All those cords should be readily apparent in case anything goes wrong. Like now it's like if those wires fuck up, then it's like, well, I guess the rats ate them or some shit. So there's that, and we're just now at a point where like the other house is pretty much emptied, besides a bunch of shit that has to go to the dump. Like most of my shit is still packed. Like I got my computer up and my bed ready, and it's like I'm done.
That's all I need.
Because mentally I'm already checked out of this place, so it's like, well, if I need to like dash to a Motel 6 in case this red rum shit starts turning into something real, I don't want to have to repack.
You're all freaked out about it, but I think the previous owner was just that Barry Redrum of Red Rum's Automotive.
Hi, I'm Mr. Redrum, and I stole the copper out of the walls, and and he like tried to take the fucking dryer. here too for some reason. So like all the knobs are busted and the fucking dryer can't dry anything now.
The guy that works next to us, owns the office next to us, he bought a couple houses behind our offices. There's like 4 that were all owned by the same person, and they're all rentals. And he bought them from the other person, and 2 of them, just already had tenants and they're still there. But 2 of them, like, were being evicted already anyway. But then the guy that sold him the one house, he went through and he's like, you see the house, you say, okay, cool, I'm buying it. The owner, after they agreed to buy it, went in and took out the furnace and the water heater and air conditioner or something, or furnace and water heater, like just took it and then turned around and was like, oh yeah, I'm taking those with me, but you can buy them back from me if you want. And the guy was like, fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah. People get weird when they're, being kicked out of their home.
Well, no, I mean, this wasn't even the person being evicted because they didn't have anything to do with anything. This was the owner that was evicting the people.
Yeah.
Like, he kicked him out and then he sold the house and then took his, And it's funny, this is the kind of thing I would have never thought of, but we were looking at houses earlier this year, and that's something that the realtor that we were working with, we know him, we already know the guy. And he's like, yeah, you want to go through, he even, like, the house we put an offer on, he worked into the offer he listed because it had the blinds up and stuff on the windows still. Yeah. And he specifically even listed that, like, if you accept this offer, you have to leave these things, because he's like, if you don't, it's amazing what people will take, and you can't do anything about it.
Which is weird, like, because you'll go into some houses where it's like, hey, the couch is yours too, just buy this house, please. And then, like, there are other ones where it's like here, we had to fucking replace the flooring, the fridge, the stove.
I mean, I've heard of people selling their house and, like, taking the toilets with them.
I wish they took this one, because this toilet is, like most things in this house, it's just way too loud. Some things don't need to be shared, with the neighborhood.
It's got a klaxon on top every time you flush. Woo!
So yeah, that's what I've been up to these last 2 weeks. But I'm happy to be back. I'm happy that it's October. If you've listened to the show at any point in the year, you know that my target topics tend to be in that Halloween sort of ballpark.
Yeah, basically, October's the one month of the year that any of our topics are kind of relevant to anything.
Right. And this week, I got a story that kind of ties into, and I believe I did it in last October. Last October, I made a real point to stick to scary shit. Because we, even though that's my pet thing, we do branch out and stuff. And I believe it was in that month I talked about something that genuinely scared me growing up, which was the Villisca axe murderer house, the story behind that. Because a lot of the scary stuff I talk about, we laugh about, and, it's all dumb shit because, we won't believe in ghosts until there's one directly fucking us up.
I was going to say, I could probably be getting stabbed to death by a poltergeist and be like, yeah, you're not real. There's a scientific explanation behind this.
That's the thing. We will doubt it until it's too late every time. That's the motto of this show. And so today I got kind of a similar story in that ballpark. This is another brutal murderer story. That's true. And so, of course, after 2 weeks, we're not really bringing the feel-good feels to the show. It's pretty graphic. If that's just not your thing, thanks for hanging out for 10 minutes with us. But, I want to give people the go-ahead to check out.
Damn it, I listened to these two idiots ramble about nothing for 10 minutes, and now I find out that I can't even listen to this.
I can't even hear about fucking horrible murders. But yeah, just close this audio file and just march forward to a happier life. Godspeed. For the rest of you, the year was 1922, and in the Bavarian town of Grobern, there was an isolated farmstead near the woods.
That's the perfect setup for something like this too.
Yeah, something bad's gonna happen.
Old-timey Bavaria, and then you add on top of it, it's not just Bavarian, it's an isolated farm.
Yeah. Which is funny. Quick backtrack. This weekend I went over to Seattle and to a couple places over on that side of Washington. And one place is a place called Leavenworth, and it's a Bavarian-style village just in Washington.
I just saw that on Twitter. I'd never heard of it before.
And it's a total tourist trap. Everything's really expensive and stuff, but it's really cool. Everything, like most of the shops are like, sort of mom and pop operations, but they have a Safeway there, but even that has to keep the Bavarian aesthetic. So it's like a wooden sign and shit.
That's what I thought. I saw like a Starbucks, but it was like, it looked like an old Bavarian.
Yeah.
It might not have been Starbucks, but there was something like that was recognizable. It might have been the Safeway, but
yeah. And there's like dancing fucking toys and stuff. Like, we're talking end of September and it feels like Christmas over there already. So it's really cool. So imagine like a really nice little Bavarian town, and then quickly get away from that and run off into the woods to find some isolated, scary fucking farm cut off from everything. And that's where we're talking about a place called Hinterkaifeck, which is probably pronounced smoother than that, but it's really hard to tell with German language.
No, it's probably less smooth than that. You said it too smoothly.
Too smooth. So this place was home to Victoria Gabriel, age 35, and her two children, Kazelia, and age 7, and Joseph, age 2. And also living with her were her elderly parents, Andreas and Kazelia the elder. I don't know if it's Kazelia or Cecilia, but I think it's pretty fucked up to name your kid after somebody who has a confusing as fuck name. Because it's like, think about it. Maybe 100 years from now, somebody wants to do a podcast about your family and their tragedy. Right. And to do that,
they have no idea how to pronounce it.
And that's just inconsiderate. Yeah, I can't Google translate, like, pronunciations. I don't have time for that. So I'm going to keep calling it Kazelia, but if it's Cecilia, sorry. A little before the end of March one day, Andreas was outside the farm when he noticed something unnerving. It was winter, so in the otherwise pristine snow, he noticed there was a path of footprints from the nearby woods heading to the farm, only going that one way. So they didn't go back out into the farm. They didn't go in a circle. It was a straight line from the woods to their property. And despite clearly being a fucking red flag, Andreas didn't do anything about it.
He's like, well, he probably went inside and printed up a bunch of those like inspirational Jesus posters, like.
Right. Well, no, he bitched about it to any neighbors who did talk to them. Frequently, he bitched about hearing footsteps in the attic, as well as missing keys to the tool shed. And he even found a newspaper in the house that nobody had purchased. And he didn't do shit about it. He didn't fucking report it or shoot it around. Like,
if the footprints never left, I guess it could have. I don't know what the period of time we're talking here, but
yeah, we'll flesh it out a little bit.
I was going to say, how did somebody go out and get a newspaper but not leave
to bury the lead a little bit? Just because this happened a little before the end of March didn't mean this story actually started there. Okay. There's a good chunk of time involved, supposedly.
So is this like the great-great-grandmother of that one woman you did the podcast about that kept her lover in the attic for years? I forget her name.
At least that was, an obvious case of abuse that we could solve. This is definitely more in line with the Velisca thing about, like, well, who the fuck could it be? Yeah. So he didn't do shit about it, and for about this next week, The maid at the time claimed the farmstead was haunted. She was hearing the same shit. Things were being moved, just the usual stuff you think when a haunting happens. And so she quit.
But this is why I get so condescending when people talk about, like, oh, I heard a door slam in my house. It's a ghost. It's like, it's probably a fucking person that's going to kill you. Like, investigate it. Don't just, like, be like, oh, ghosts.
I thought you were going to go the other way with that. Like, don't quit, pussy. Like, look, go try to track down the killer. So this maid quit, and tragically, the position was filled again almost immediately by a woman named Maria Baumgartner. And she wouldn't survive her first day on the job.
Cool.
Yeah, this is, again, feel-good story of the week, folks. Non-essential podcast. Share it with your friends. On March 31st, a still unknown individual, or potentially multiple people, lured the 6 residents of the farm, so you had the 5 members of the family and the maid, lured these 6 residents to their death. Andreas, his wife Victoria, and the 7-year-old Kazilia were brought to the barn and slaughtered with a pickaxe. The elder Kazilia, which, breaking out a little bit, is a great band name, showed signs of strangulation, and everyone in the barn received numerous skull-smashing blows to their heads. Investigators suspect that the only person who didn't die immediately in this attack was the young daughter, who, even more terrible, they suspect she was in pure shock for several hours before she succumbed to her injuries. Maria and young Joseph received similar fate in their bedchambers. So, like I said, it's a graphic story. I try when I recap it to not like wallow into the details, but you get the idea. Guy had a fucking pickaxe. Like, I'm not trying to gross people out here, but it is brutal.
Yeah.
The Gabriels often kept their distance from the rest of the townspeople as much as they could, so it wouldn't be until April 4th that folks started to realize that young Kazilia wasn't showing up for school, and the mailman noticed that the mail had just started piling up in their box. And finally, people called the police to check, and there they found the horrific scene.
So it was almost you said, was it May 10th that this happened, and it was April 4th that they...
May 10th. Yeah, full year went by. No, it was March.
March. Yeah.
It was.
I do that every fucking time. You can't have 2 months to start with the same letter.
It's bullshit.
The hell?
First two letters. That's a trick question. That's entrapment. So it was. They think they suspect that the murder happened on March 31st. So it was like better
4 or 5 days.
Yeah, the better part of a week. So a search party went and saw the scene. While the victims in the barn were pretty much left as they had died, one peculiar thing about this murder was that in the house, Maria and Joseph were just covered in blankets and kind of dismissed, but the rest of life on the farm seemed to continue as normal. Fires were lit in the earth, and Fires in the Hearth is, again, another great band name. Animals were fed, meals were being cooked. The killer basically ran the fucking place for days after the murder, supposedly under a very terrible misunderstanding of property rights.
Yeah.
So after the investigation of the crime scene, police were convinced that the killer had such a knowledge of everything on the farm that they could not have been hiding there for merely a week. They suspect this person had been there for months. So, you know, seeing the footprints, finding a newspaper, hearing shit, like people, they suspect this guy was just coming and going. Why they only noticed the footprints just that one notable time? Or maybe there was more and it just never got told.
Yeah, I mean, if there's enough people, I mean, 5 isn't a ton of people, or 6 counting the help, but I could see it getting overlooked where there's a set of footprints, but you just assume it was somebody else
Right.
in the family until you realize, oh, it just started snowing an hour ago and we've all been inside, something like that.
Right.
But
I think what made that notable was like every story emphasizes like it was pristine, fresh snow. So somebody had come out of the woods to come to their place. So initially, they thought some wandering vagrant was the culprit, but what's kind of weird is, like I said, they stuck around the farm, and you would think a thief that pulled a murder like this would want to get as far away from the crime scene as possible. And stranger yet, all the like valuables were left around. So like they just hung out and they didn't take anything when they finally did leave.
Well, and it's weird that they finally, because now it goes from the like, oh man, they weren't found for almost a week to, well, this person stuck around and did this stuff, but he was already gone when they came,
Yeah, so eventually suspicion shifted to men who the town knew had a connection to the family. Victoria's husband had died in World War I, so nobody knew who the father... this husband would be the father of Kazilia, but nobody knew who the father of Joseph actually was, because Joseph was born well after her husband supposedly died. She at that point she had been in a relationship with a man named Lorenz Schlittenbauer, and there's just something about German names that sounds so made up when I say them. It's just like, it's a Lorenz Wichtenberger. Yeah, like you can just make up anything and you have no choice to believe me. So Lorenz actually led the search party that found the brutal crime scene, and during his relationship with Victoria, seemed fairly devoted to her and young Joseph. The two publicly claimed Joseph as their child, and they planned to get married, but Victoria's father, Andreas, wouldn't allow it. Back in that time, if you're not getting married, that kind of ends your relationship, and Lorenz would end up remarrying someone else, but the baby from that marriage would die a few weeks after birth.
Did that happen before or after this massacre? Like, was he remarried by the time of the...
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And then the baby died. So this led to, you could call it a theory. I call it throwing shit at the wall. Police seemed kind of desperate to find a link, and they figured that Lorenz was traumatized by the death of his newborn and was also unwilling to pay child support for Joseph, so he murdered an entire family. Not impossible, not really a theory.
No, I mean, he would definitely go on my suspect list as a investigator. Like, let's check this out.
As a connection, but that's not really a theory.
Just like you check out any...
That's like slapping two potential motives together and hoping...
Hey guys, I saw this one episode of CSI in Las Vegas where the estranged father came back and killed the family. Maybe that's it.
It's like, yeah, because you're saying he both snapped but also wanted to hang on to his money. So,
but also somehow did all this without his wife noticing that he was missing for months at a time. Like, just disappear, even if he wasn't like living there. Like,
right.
Somehow he's supporting his wife, and that seems unlikely.
So like I said, again, not impossible, not really a theory you can really hang anything on him for. But the reason it had any weight at all for police was the fact that, one, he only lived a few hundred yards from Victoria's farm. So he would have access, and because of his relationship with her, he would have a familiarity with the place. And probably the biggest hunch investigators had against them, which, TV and movies always like to dramatize like the effectiveness of this policeman hunch, but it's really not much you can base a case off of, obviously. But they thought it was really suspicious how like cool and collected he was during the search party. Like, he was viewing and handling the bodies without any like really visible repulsion, according to them.
Yeah, and that, I mean, it's all stuff. I don't know if we've talked about it on on this podcast or before. It's probably come up. My degree is actually in law enforcement, and I went through a college, and then went through police academy. So I've had some training. I don't want to make it sound like, oh yeah, I'm a forensic whatever, because I'm not. But I'm familiar with the process, and it's all stuff that, like, if I was the police officer, and again, we're talking 1920s, and police work back then it's still laughable in a lot of ways, but back then it didn't like follow any rhyme or reason really.
Right.
But yeah, that's stuff you pay attention to. Be like, who could possibly have motive? Who knew these people? Who had contact? Sure, you note all that, and then, oh, he acted a little different when he saw the body, so what you'd expect. You make a note of that, but none of that makes anybody guilty of anything, because we all react to stuff differently.
Exactly. So, like, so like they talk about like how he handled the search party and stuff, but it kind of goes the other way to say, like, yeah, of course he knew his way around the property. He was in a relationship with Victoria, so leading the search party probably wasn't a problem for him. And as far as his reaction to the bodies, he could very well have been in complete shock. You just don't know with people how they're going to...
Or some people go into almost this, like, I tend to... Shock. You detach yourself from it. It's not necessarily even shock. It's just you're in this, like, response mode. Like,
you have to, some people, in order to progress to figure things out, you have to kind of shut down emotionally to sort of navigate the trauma of what you're dealing with.
Which is why we have police officers, or better yet, firefighters and EMTs that can respond to situations where there might be a kid dying in the street, because if you can't shut your emotions off, even if it's not a relative, a normal human being's going to see that and freak out, and some people can see that and not. So
right. So these are all just hunches, and again, like, nobody knows, and especially we're talking 100 years later, almost. Like, I certainly don't know, but there's something about Lorenz that just makes it seem like, well, he's the first person they knew had a connection. But there was actually, like, there just wasn't anything there to place him there on the night of the crime. So there was nothing that you could really do to solidify him as a suspect.
Yeah. I'd say at least it sounds like, although I don't know the end game to this story, they didn't do that thing where they're like, well, there's no actual evidence, but he's our best fit, so we're going to push ahead with this anyway.
No, they moved on to worse theories.
Good for them.
But yeah, credit to them to be able to, like, nope, that doesn't work. We'll try something dumber. Police then considered that Victoria's husband, Carl Gabriel, was actually still alive and came back and killed them.
You had a kid with another man, you're all dead.
Yeah, so this investigation is just burning hot with good ideas about what could have happened.
Well, again, they're all, like, great ideas for, like,
a story,
TV or Hollywood, right?
Totally. The problem is, again, he died in World War I, and thankfully this theory got shot down pretty quick, because Carl Gabriel's fellow soldiers could easily attest to seeing Carl fall in battle almost 10 years before any of this happened. They also considered that Joseph was the child of Victoria and her own father, Andreas, and that one of the two killed the family members and then themselves.
It is pretty easy to bludgeon yourself to death with a pickaxe,
Yeah.
Especially to do it in a way that makes it not obvious that you did it.
And also, it doesn't.
Because wouldn't you die with a pickaxe in your hand?
Right. Because Andreas and Victoria were both murdered in the barn. I don't believe the axe was anywhere near, like, I don't think they found him, like, by their body in such a way. I don't know why I'm speculating. I know the answer is no. So Andreas, but to flesh out the theory, Andreas had a good amount of rumors around his name regarding a vast history of incest and abuse. How much or how little of that is true, I can't really say, but there was kind of a belief among town that he had many other children with his wife, but only Victoria survived his violence to make it to adulthood. But But like I said, whether that's true or not, none of the injuries sustained by the victims lined up with what could have been self-inflicted. So the police were fucked, basically. The killer...
They're like, we've tried 3 people.
Yep,
I'm
3 strikes you're out rule. That's how you get away with murder, kids. The killer had to somehow be somebody who didn't live on the farm, but by that point knew the farm really well, and apparently didn't want money, but just wanted to live on their farm for a while. And nobody in the small social circle could be actually... in the family's small social circle could actually be connected to the crime.
Did we ever consider it was the police that did it themselves? That's why they're so bad at this investigation. Like, oh man, it's a mystery.
Yeah. We just hate families with babies. So. As law enforcement. The case got closed, and for the last century it's been reopened. Like any famous murder mystery, it's been reopened several times with people trying to solve it. They even gave clairvoyance a crack at it by taking the bodies of the Gruber family, beheading them, and sending the skulls back to Munich to be examined for metaphysical clues.
Okay, I was about to give him points for trying that, the seer thing, the whole mystic, until you're like, oh, they dug him up and beheaded him.
Yep.
It's like, no, make that fucking lazy-ass mystic come out there and, like, stand over the grave.
Well... that would have been a better idea, because after many hours of staring at the bashed skulls of this family, I'm sure the clairvoyants said to themselves, like, oh fuck, this was never going to help. Whoops.
I sense that this was done by a terrible individual, a shadowy figure.
They are telling me this was a bad idea. Send them back.
I was fucking joking, you idiots.
Metaphysical clues is not a thing.
Like, somebody that's just like your average like street corner palm reader they contacted out of the blue. They're like, we need help solving this case. What do you need? And they're like, I don't know. Dig them up and send me their heads.
Yeah.
And then like a month later, the heads show up and they're like, oh shit, they did it. Better yet,
when they sent these, when they did send those heads to the clairvoyants. This was happening during World War II, and during that fucking, lovely commotion, the skulls got lost.
Yeah, because I'd imagine that's the furthest thing from your mind during...
There's already dead people when you're trying to survive, yeah.
Right.
So the farm was demolished a year after the murder, and the now headless family are buried in a plot in Weidhofen. So
it's haunted as fuck.
Exactly. Like, even though this isn't a ghost story, there's no way at least one of those places isn't haunted as fuck. Like, for sure.
That's how you prove, like, if you're some ghost hunter and you're trying to prove the go to one of those places, because if they don't exist there, they don't exist anywhere.
Right.
Like that's your classic recipe for...
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, the last chapter kind of on this, well, not really. There's 2 more things.
The penultimate.
The
chapter.
penultimate.
I like that word.
Yeah. In 2007, the Wurstenfeldbruck Police Academy, which that's a fucking mouthful, opened the case, but due to the relatively limited forensic evidence of the day, as well as just, it's been 100 years, plain missing evidence and the deaths of all the suspects. And you're sending it to a police academy. It's like, here, they couldn't solve it back then, but 100 years later, our students are on it. Yeah. So, with the deaths of suspects, missing evidence, there was no way to really get a solid ID on the murderer, though they all claim to agree on a theory of what actually happened that night. But they won't say what that theory is. So my great detective conclusion is that the fucking academy is full of shit. So, or they... At the end of the day, the theory they put together was some, like, Ernest Goes to Camp, like, series of, like,
just blunders like, oh, well, you know, the dad went out to the barn to get a pickaxe and he dropped it on his foot and the wife came running. And when she tried to pick it up off of him, she accidentally smashed him in the head. And then that led to her screaming and the granddad. And it's like, no, yeah.
Right.
I guess that theory holds as much water as any of the other ones I've heard so far. It's just like this long, tragic, like, series of...
I really hate the idea of these people being like, well, we have a strong idea of what happened there, but we don't want to say. It's been 100 years. Say it.
It's like that kid in school. We all had one in our like class that would be like, yeah, my uncle's a famous athlete. And you're like, who? And he's like, I'm not going to tell you. It's like, yeah, because you're full of shit.
Yeah, you're a fucking liar. So,
I've seen you play dodgeball. There's no athleticism in that family tree.
So the last theory to kind of come out about this happened just 2 years ago, 2017. Father-daughter writer duo Super Team, Bill James and Rachel McCarthy James, speculated that the killer was actually linked to another American murderer who was never caught. So they solved like 15 crimes in one book. In their book, The Man from the Train, they posit that a man named Paul Mueller, an immigrant of either Austrian or German birth, was responsible for a series of eerily similar murders in America. In their examples, households were killed with an axe of some sort, or at least a weapon in that ballpark, some sort of heavy, blunt, sharp thing.
Melee weapon. He was not a range fighter.
A brawler.
Yeah.
And the killer would hang out at the scene for a while before moving on to the next town. He supposedly targeted households with young daughters, particularly. They believe he may be the unidentified killer from the Villisca axe murderer house. And since the killings in America weren't reported on internationally, if it was Mueller, he would have been able to duplicate this modus operandi without drawing attention to the pattern while he was in another country. Cops.
Well, but it seems like he was able to do it multiple times, according to the theory here, without people catching on.
Well, that's what kind of bolsters their theory. Is the axe murders in America stopped kind of abruptly in 1912, just as Mueller was kind of showing up on the police's radar. He disappeared right around this point. Bill and Rachel James suspect that Mueller returned to his homeland to evade arrest, and after lying low for a decade, resumed his murder spree in the same savage manner as before.
I was going to ask, and I don't know if you have the answer to this or not, but if there were any other like similar murders that like they ended up kind of linking to it, not in necessarily that area, but like it's so much harder in Europe because you're like, you take 8 steps and you're in a different country, and so they don't necessarily put 2 and 2 together right away, especially back then.
Right. Well, and I mean, like, with the title, The Man from the Train, they have the idea that while he was in America, he would hop on a train, go a long distance to a new town, and even that kind of, flies under the radar if you put enough distance between them. And then, like you said, if you go to Europe and you're doing that same shit, you're in different countries, you're way disconnected from everything you do after just one train ride. But it's a theory. Like, we tend to think of serial killers as pretty impulsive people. So it's initially a little hard to believe, like, one would be capable of laying low for, like, a whole decade.
Right.
But it's important to remember, like, BTK lasted even longer before he felt compelled to put himself in the public image again with his murders.
Well, and it sounds like they know who this guy, obviously they have his name, so I don't know anything about him or his life. It's amazing how many of them we say, oh, they laid low, and it's like they really don't. They're in public eye, it's just they're not doing anything to directly link them to the other things.
And that was the other thing I was going to say, is like, it's also an assumption to assume during this time that he was laying low. Like, for all we know, he may have been killing all the same during that time. It just, he managed to do it without the spotlight hitting him. But this series is just one, and I'm sure in like 10 years somebody else will have a new book to sell claiming they figured out a case that gets closer and closer to being impossible to solve with every passing day.
I kind of feel like we're already at that. It's impossible to solve. And at this point, it's also moot because whoever did it is obviously not still alive. Or if they are, they're on their deathbed. Yeah.
But yeah, that's the story of the Hinterkaifeck murders.
I hate these stories though because it's why they're so popular, because it's like, well, now you're gonna like forever be like, God, there has to be an answer to this, but they're really, like I said, there's no evidence. We're far enough away from it.
Well, that's why it fucking terrified me. It's like
you're just never going to have an answer. I mean,
you have no answer. There's no reasoning behind it. You've never met the person who's going to kill you. You didn't fucking wrong them.
And that's the thing too, as far as we know. And there might have actually be like I always hate to use the term like an understandable reason, because most of us can't like fathom, be like, reason. Oh, okay, we get why you slaughtered a family with a pickaxe, including children. Like, no, but I mean, what I mean by that is like something that like you would say, oh, okay, like there was a singular event towards a singular person that spurred this like berserk outrage and like murder, and it's like to where it makes sense. Like,
right.
Even if you can't, nothing could ever justify it. You could be like, oh, okay, there was a personal grudge from this person.
Yeah.
Which I think in a way like makes these stories, when that's the answer, they're still horrific, but you at least as a other individual, you could feel like, okay, well, as long as I don't like piss off a person like that, I'm safe.
Right. You want people, as just in general, we want reasons and like we want justice.
Yeah. We want to feel like we're not going to get slaughtered in our sleep for just random, like the guy's like, this house looks like a good one too.
Right. And that was what terrified me about the Veliska story as a kid, because it was kind of like the first time you realize just like how chaotic and cruel the universe can kind of be, you know, and in that like sometimes just fucking horrible shit could come out of nowhere and happen to you.
Yeah, for no reason.
For no fucking reason. So yeah.
And now I'm thinking, like I said, I kind of half joking, kind of not, like when you're at home, it's like, oh, I hear footsteps in the attic. It's like, fucking check it out. Like, or better yet, have somebody else check it out.
Call your friends, get your fucking torches. If you don't find them within an hour, you burn the place down and rebuild.
Right. That's what I was just thinking about. Like, I'm sitting here thinking, if I heard footsteps in the attic right now, I live in a tiny house and our attic's, you know, not finished or anything. It's just your typical beams and insulation.
Right.
And it's got like right in our one hallway in our house, like it's a tiny, tiny house, but there is like one of those pull down like latches that a ladder unfolds and you can climb up there. And I've literally been in my attic maybe 4 times in the 15 years we've owned this house. Right. There's no reason to go up there, and it sucks, and insulation sucks. It makes you itchy and whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, my whole point is, if I heard somebody walking around up there, there's one way to get up there, and there's 0 ways to get up there without setting yourself up to be.
That one way will now be on fire. So.
Right. Well, right, because there's no way that I could pull that ladder down and like go up there without like completely lowering my guard. Like, if there was somebody up there that meant ill will towards you, there's no way I could get up there and discover them before that they would kill me anyway. Like,
I'm curious,
because you have to climb this rickety ass ladder. Like,
yeah, like we've talked about this before, but I'm curious, like, you know, as a dad now, like, you know, I'm sure most of you is just like, I'm tired a lot now. But like, you know, I've talked before about how if like any fucking sound happens, and that's why this new place is driving me nuts. Anytime a sound happens, I gotta check it out. I gotta fucking know what's happening in my goddamn house. Is there like an extra like level of dread if you hear some shit? Like, because now it's like, fuck, I gotta protect my daughter.
I honestly, there hasn't been any remote situations like that, so I couldn't answer. But I mean, that's kind of how because it's always been a mixer. If there's something weird like that it's like, I want to check it out, but there's of course a bigger part of me dreading.
The biggest dread is grizzly bear.
Well, I'd be better with that. My biggest dread is that it is a person, and not necessarily that they want to hurt me, but that I have to interact with them.
I was just gonna say, yeah, your probably biggest dread is like an awkward conversation, like, hey, you don't live here. I mean, you could, I guess, but I don't think you do.
Like, there's a neighborhood kid, and for whatever reason, he loves to hang out in our front yard. And our front yard's like 8 square feet. Like, it's not like a big front yard. And I think he's special needs, but I don't know for sure or whatever. And that's fine. I never, if he's out there playing, but like one day he did that.
Someone should enjoy the yard, right?
Yeah, right. But one day he did that like kid thing where he like knocked on the door, and I thought, oh, he's got a question or he wants something or whatever. But then of course as I go to answer it, I see him like run and hide behind the bush like he thinks it's funny, and it's like like the biggest annoyance is that I have to like say something, and it's just, but then I just did that, like play it off like, hey, did you need something? And because I don't think he realized I knew who it was. We got 2 giant front windows. I could see him go up to the door. But
you should have taken him under your wing, shown him how to actually ding dong ditch.
Like look, first you need a bag of dog shit. I barely ever pick up after mine, so it's easy to get. Just go in the backyard there and bag it up. Set it on fire, then knock on the door.
Better lure your target to the yard where it's full of dog shit.
Then go out to the shed and grab the first like pickaxe you find. Oh wait, no.
The wrong lessons being taken from the show. But so hopefully that got you in a. Maybe it just bummed you out, but maybe it got you in like a Halloween state of mind. Because that's the shit that freaks me out. So.
It can slow these people's roll, because everybody I know is so fucking psyched for fall and Halloween and October and pumpkins and shit, and I hate it because not that I hate fall. Fall's a great season, but here in Ohio, fall is about 3.5 days long, and then you go right from 90-degree summer to like shitty, sleety.
Oh yeah, we're freezing our asses off here, but I love this time of the year all the same.
It just depresses me because summer's my favorite. And it's like, so it's kind of that double edge. It's like fall's nice, but it means summer's over and I won't see the sun again for 8 months. Like, but anyway, so yeah, like everybody's like, oh, Halloween, haha, horror, haha.
I'm like,
well, here's a family that actually got slaughtered. Ha.
Yeah, they're not enjoying Halloween anymore.
Right.
You fuckers.
You think this is a game, motherfuckers?
This is a non-essential podcast where bad shit happens to good people.
And we're here to remind you of it. Right.
Maybe they were good. They might have been pricks. But they
That's
didn't.
what I mean. They might have deserved it, but
no.
The police just couldn't figure it out.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and 2-year-old and 7-year-old didn't fucking. I'm gonna make an assumption about their character and say that I got
stuck on a carriage ride with this family, and that damn 2-year-old screamed the whole time, and the mom wouldn't discipline him, and the dad was a drunkard.
It was fucking Joseph, man. He got fucking bogged down with some bad people with some bad debts. That's why you don't let 2-year-olds gamble.
All I'm saying is that this horrible family slaughter murder guy, or woman, but probably
that's a good murderer nickname. I like that better than man on the train or whatever the fuck.
horrible murderer guy.
Murder guy.
But I like to think part of him, he's not all bad, because I think the reason he stuck around afterwards is like, well, shit,
farm animals.
Somebody needs to feed these animals. They shouldn't suffer. Like they're innocent animals.
That's the episode quote. The fucking guy kills 6 people. You found the one string to pull where you could be like, he's not all bad. Like, yeah, he's all bad. He didn't
want the animals to suffer.
The reason the fucking pigs were fed was because he was going to feed them human.
After, like, probably having sex with them or something, but...
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I'm gonna wager that this guy was quite off.
Quite good at pig fucking.
Yeah. That's why he slaughtered the family. He got caught out there with old Bessie. And he's like, well, shit, I don't want this to go around town. That'll ruin my reputation severely.
And then, like, people are like, well, he was, like, blending in with the search party, and, like, it came out like everybody already knew. And he was like, fuck.
The police they're like, we're going to have to search for DNA evidence, and he just starts sweating. Fortunately for him, that wasn't a thing then.
Luckily, it's only on old Bessie.
The family looks like they died in a horrible shock. The cows look okay, but that pig looks quite worried.
The cops are fucking NFL refs, and it's like, that's not conclusive. Anyone could fuck that pig.
Why is it looking at you like that, Frankovich? I do not know.
All right. Well, pig
That went to a weird place.
Somehow we got to pig fucking. So we're back on top form after 2 weeks off. Happy to be back.
Didn't miss a beat. Yes.
And we'll have more stuff next week. Thank you all for bearing with us in kind of a weird time. I know we've been off and on a lot like the last couple months, but the train's rolling again. But not the murder train, but
I was gonna say, train's rolling. Just watch for anybody that gets off.
Yeah, keep your fucking tool shed locked and hide your keys.
Yeah. Mine's not. Now that I think about it,
you should go lock that.
Yeah, I don't have any axes or pickaxes, but I do have like these really long shears, like this garden shears that are like.
I'm only half kidding. Long. You should go lock that because this story is fresh in my mind. So
I'm gonna laugh it off, and I won't, and then we won't have a show next week because I'll be murdered in my sleep.
I got connections. I'll get Kelly on here. We'll tell your story next week.
Oh, good. I deserve to have my story told,
and we'll slander your name a little bit based off of town rumors.
Yeah, you'll get to the end and be like I would be in the situation, like, yeah, well, the police don't really know, but he probably deserved it.
They suspect he fucked pigs. All right. So, we'll be back next week. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.